Welcome to Pathways to Partnership, the podcast powered by MoveAmerica. Here, we explore the intersection of industry, government, and academia, where collaboration sparks innovation and strengthens our nation's defense industrial base. Each episode will bring you thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and real-world success stories that showcase the pathways to building a stronger, more innovative defense industry. And now, here's your host, Rick from MoveAmerica.
Today, we have Mr. Earl Wyatt. Mr. Wyatt is the Executive Director of MoveAmerica. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. He has led efforts in emerging technologies, rapid prototyping, and defense acquisition. Mr. Wyatt has also played a key role in advancing defense innovation, which makes him a leading voice in national security and technology advancement. Earl, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleased to do so. Thank you, Richard.
One of the reasons that we wanted to have you on here is, of course, you had a very long and distinguished career in the Air Force. You've been very involved with technology and getting things ready for the warfighter. I want to have you, first give a little bit of an introduction, give a bit of background on yourself as far as everything that you've done in your career that has been helping the innovation in the defense industrial base.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like many members of the United States Air Force, getting an opportunity to work in weapon systems development is something that was something I sought to do. Not so very much because I wanted to develop weapons as much as I wanted to develop a capability so that we would never have to use the weapons. I oftentimes think that the most successful weapon systems are those that don't have to be used. Your adversary looks at you today and thinks maybe tomorrow is the best way to make that happen. And sometimes it's not so very much about the fact that you have one of those, but that you have as a nation an ability to mobilize and make as many of those as possible. So when I wasn't working specifically on a particular system, working to ensure that we had an industrial base that could be responsive to those needs and respond when an increased amount of that capability was required was also an important part of what I got a chance to do. So I've had the chance to work on some major systems that I have enjoyed. I worked on the B-2 program, got a chance to work on the F-16 program, got a chance to work on the Joint Strike Fighter program. I worked at DARPA for a while in the development of unmanned combat systems, and then got an opportunity to work within the department to accelerate capability getting to the warfighter when they needed it. And then working toward developing an emerging capability that says, couldn't forecast that we were going to have a need, but we see an opportunity or we see a potential threat. Can we respond in a much more rapid fashion without necessarily being urgent? So I've had more than enough opportunities to learn and know what doesn't work. And so sometimes that's equally as important as what you did that did work. And so it's extremely important to me and the ability of MoveAmerica to be able to help the nation respond. And in so doing, helping to ensure that we have a domestic industrial base capable of meeting the needs, national interest needs, not always national security, but certainly national interest needs. And where they parallel, that's ideal for us all.
And certainly one of those areas where the industrial base really needs to continue to move forward is through innovation. How would you define innovation within the context of the DIB, and why is it vital for accelerating our national security and even, like you said, just advancing our nation as a whole?
A couple of things. The department buys weapon systems for two reasons, sourcing, and innovation is core to that. It's actually the introduction of new capabilities that allows us to accomplish missions that we can't accomplish today. And in certain circumstances, being more lethal by increasing the same level of survivability, being faster in terms of our ability to make decisions so that we can ensure that we know where we should engage and where we shouldn't. So for us, when I think about technology, I say, will this capability, will this technology, for example, it could be a system, it could be a process, it could be an algorithm, it could be a device. Will this enable us to do something that we currently do more cost effectively, therefore freeing up resources to do other things that the nation may want to spend money on? And so if I can do something more efficiently, that frees up money from the Department of Defense that may be able to go to the Department of Agriculture, Department of Homeland Security, that kind of a thing. And then the other, does it allow us to do something that we currently can't do today, but if we were able to do, we could end the war sooner or prevent somebody from a deterrence factor to prevent them from even engaging us. So from a defense perspective, more efficiency, or if you will, a major deterrent. And then in other areas, why I think it's so important that we accelerate it is having a domestic defense industrial base capable of meeting that need increases our independence and reduces our vulnerability. We learned during the COVID pandemic that you can have the strongest relationship with an ally, but if they don't have the capacity to be able to produce for themselves, they certainly can't help produce for you. And so you have to have an ability. It may not be the most cost-effective way to do it, but you have to have an ability to be able to produce what you need for your national interest and your national security. And so we move to bring in those processes. We move to bring in those devices, those systems, those algorithms that will allow us to do the missions required, whether it's intelligence processing, whether it's propulsion, getting there faster, whether it's increasing the lift so that I can carry more supplies to wherever it has to be relocated. If we can do those things based on the domestic industrial base and do things and do it faster in terms of getting that capability to market faster, then we position ourselves in such a way that maybe we won't have to fight tomorrow. Or if we have to support an ally, we can make sure we get them what they need as soon as they need so that therefore we put them in the best position to have a competitive advantage on the battlefield.
Now, the Fed for years has been putting out this critical and emerging technologies list. They put it out every year. Over the past few years, have you seen any specific types of technologies or any key trends that have really emerged that are reshaping the industrial base?
I think there's several. Actually, that critical and emerging technology list includes agriculture, it includes atmospheric concerns with weather, energy. So there's several components that come together to produce that list. But I think without question, one, it's been critical to all of us. Cybersecurity, that is an item on the critical and emerging technology list, and I don't think it's ever going to leave. I think cyber is something that we have to be paying very, very close attention to. Hypersonics, the fact that moving 5 times the speed of sound is important. I have an Air Force background, so speed is king with me. And getting there sooner, getting there faster, being able to outmaneuver your adversary is key. But weapon systems that fly at those speeds reduce your reaction time. And so therefore you have to be much more keen in terms of your sensor technologies to be able to detect those systems and be able to process a counter solution in a rapid fashion is equally as important. So we think of cyber and we think of hypersonics and we think of the idea of rapid response with our sensor systems. I'm going to also introduce one that I think we all know, but advanced manufacturing, the ability to be able to produce tangible goods in a smaller footprint, sometimes with advanced materials that can perform the same function and do so in a lighter, faster, quicker fashion is key. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't address artificial intelligence, where that's coming to play in terms of our ability to be able to make meaningful decisions with data that we have at our disposal. In some circumstances, it helped with logistics in ways that we hadn't thought about it. We have a lot of data that tells us what we should be doing with engines, but we have rules of thumb that were dictating when we took engines off airplanes and put them in the phase to, if you will, get them regenerated, cleaned, and back out onto the carrier deck for the Navy or back out to the Air Force. And in the Army, most people don't recognize the Army probably has more aircraft than the Air Force has. But through AI, the logistics community learned that they could fly aircraft longer, wouldn't have to bring them in, adjust what metrics they could use. And in that fashion, they were able to then buy fewer, be able to keep them longer, and maintain a certain operational readiness at a lower cost for sustainment. So AI is not just helping us in terms of processing on the battlefield or in the command and control center, probably more suited than on the battlefield, but also in terms of the other things that we're using to make decisions to field weapon systems to put us in the best position to defend our interests. So I think under those circumstances, looking at AI, looking at hypersonics, looking at cyber technology, looking at our sensors, looking at advanced manufacturing. And then I think I have one more that I would probably like to add, and that's autonomous systems. The idea that we're using robotics and autonomous systems that help us with regard to accomplishing certain missions that are more dangerous or in some circumstances, maybe more dull. You don't want to use an individual to do that. It's somewhat repetitive that can warn you when you should be paying attention. And in some circumstances, when you don't have sufficient manpower in a particular region, it may offer you equal amounts of capability without having to expend critical manpower resources.
A lot of great information there. Again, AI is something that people don't know whether or not to fear it or whether or not to embrace it. I think it all depends on the circumstance. But even like when you were talking about hypersonics, because I can remember years ago when I was supporting a DARPA program, they were trying to put together an aircraft that would traverse the country in less than an hour. And the biggest challenge that they had was when you hit that speed, the materials that they used for the craft would melt. They couldn't handle it. So it's one of those things where, again, you've got to continuously emerge and evolve. I think that's really happened. The relationship between commercial innovation and military capability has really evolved over the past decade. Wouldn't you say so?
I certainly would. There's clearly, in past decades, the industrial base supporting the Defense Department of the Defense Industrial Base was a major contributor to the commercial innovation that we enjoyed in America. And I think in some areas, there's still some sectors where that is key. But I would certainly think when it comes to information technology, particularly, military or the Department of Defense is a recipient or an adopter to the commercial innovation that's coming out of the private sector. There are things that we're still trying to, if you will, properly harness in an environment where cyber matters, where the durability of a rigorous military or an operational environment doesn't allow us to, if you will, incorporate it tomorrow. But we're working on those things, the speed upon which we process information, the volume of assets that we could track simultaneously. In some circumstances, the network and the volumes of data that we can stream across those networks is all benefiting from what's taking place in the commercial market and our ability to adapt that technology and therefore allow the Defense Department to expend a greater number of their resources or dollars in areas that aren't being pursued by the commercial community. But the Department of Defense is certainly taking advantage of the leadership in the commercial information technology arena.
And then I know that over the past several years, there's been a really increased focus. I'll just say, I'll term it as that, an increased focus in, again, trying to reach out into the commercial sector to try to get that innovation into the defense industrial base. And a lot of it has to do with reaching the companies that aren't traditionally part of the defense industrial base, whether it's because of size or whether it's because of the years that they've been in existence. There are just always those less experienced businesses that have that innovation available, but aren't able to get it into the defense industrial base. And I know you deal with that a lot, particularly with the work at MoveAmerica, where it's always trying to get those less experienced companies to get into the defense industrial base. What are some of the major obstacles you see those companies encounter when they're trying to get into government procurement?
There's a couple of them. Some is, for example, knowing who to go to. You know, the idea is I have this wonderful processor that I think can reduce the time it takes for us to determine whether there's a real threat or not. Or I have this wonderful manufacturing capability that will allow me to increase my productivity without necessarily increasing my footprint of my factory. Who do I get a chance to talk to? Another one is access to capital. I've demonstrated that I'm capable. My prototype is something that they want. And they've expressed a real commitment on their part to make that happen. But from the time that they have that to the time that they get it through the budget cycle and get it to the point that they're prepared to release a solicitation for me to respond to, it could be 2 years. What am I doing, though, during those 2 years? If I could get access to capital so that I could, in some circumstance, begin to build a training program, or in some circumstances, increase my workforce. So as soon as that contract comes in, I'll have the staffing that I need, and I'll have them trained up to be prepared to do that. In some circumstances, are there intermediate demonstrations that I could give? So while the end application is on track, there are intermediate functions that could be supported by what I'm doing. Who do I go to help me with that? There was a study that was done by the Department of Defense in the fall of 2021 that asked about barriers to doing work with the Defense Department. And what they identified was people said, I don't know who to go to. And it simply said, and I need mentoring. And in addition to that, I would like to have at least someone to guide me along this very intricate activity as well as access to capital. And so within the department, there was a concerted effort to respond to that. So there is what's now called the APEX Accelerator Office. That APEX Accelerator, there are 97 of them across the United States. Some associated with universities, some essentially municipally supported, and some, when I say supported, within the local community and collaborates with the local municipality. And then some are associated with other industries. But these are offices where you can walk into the door and say, I have an interest in doing work with the federal government. In fact, they will also help you with the state and local government. They'll understand what it takes for you to be able to, if you will, qualify in terms of having appropriate certifications and work with you on terms of where you might be able to go to get assistance to make that happen. In addition to that, they could make you aware of what solicitations are best suited for your capability and who to talk to, and in some circumstances, when those solicitations will come out. That's an APEX Accelerator. The department also created a Defense Innovation Unit that's located with industry, other research areas that are also trying to help create an opportunity for innovation and innovators to go to talk to see how their process, their algorithm, their device, their system may be able to assist, and maybe the Department of Agriculture, maybe it's the Department of Energy, maybe it's the Department of Defense, but in essence, how to engage the federal government. So there's several entities that the department had tried to implement as a result of that survey that they conducted in the fall of 2021. But I would say the APEX Accelerators are a very good place to start when it comes to how to work with the Department of Defense or how to work with the federal government. And there are 97 throughout the nation. And so that's a really good place. And oh, by the way, when you go to them, it's not like you're going to ask and hope that they will help you. They get evaluated on how well they do help you. So for those interested in starting to do work with the federal government, and particularly the Department of Defense, APEX Accelerators are a very good place to go.
That's fantastic because, of course, and again, I know through your experience, both when you were with the Department of Defense and now with MoveAmerica, it's always about trying to make sure that you're providing those resources. Now, I also know that one of the resources that we provide is trying to warn them about some of the more common pitfalls that can certainly hurt a company's chance to getting into the federal procurement cycle, to getting into the defense supply chain. What would you say are some of the most common pitfalls that the innovative companies who really want to bring their products and services to the supply chain should avoid when they're attempting to bring that to market?
Rick, I'm glad you did ask this question because I didn't think about it earlier, but I'm glad you put it back on the table. And that is, if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a small business, if I'm an innovative performer, there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I'm trying to do. And those are the things that can create some challenges. I obviously need access to capital, but where do I get the money from? If it's hard to get it from one box, do I go to the next box? And so foreign ownership, control, or influence is a major concern on the part of the federal government. Taking funds from adversarial nation states in terms of a source of income could be a major challenge and could create some limitations into how readily the Department of Defense would be willing to work with you. But foreign direct investment isn't a bad thing. So knowing who to get money from and where your money comes from is extremely important. And the hard part is that everybody is not always as earnest or as candid as you'd like them to be. There are some adversary nations that are using shadow companies and the like to get access to innovative technologists, really bright, growing companies, so that on the one hand, they gain undue influence and in some circumstances, access to key components of the intellectual property of those innovators and have taken full advantage of them. Not only do they make it difficult for you to do some work with the department in your more mature state, but they will sometimes take advantage, take that technology, undermine your efforts, and leave the companies in a very poor state. So where you get the money from is extremely important, and doing due diligence, not just accepting, initially the fact that this is a company that several of my other colleagues have worked with before, and I'm pretty comfortable in taking funds for them. But you have to, if you will, take advantage of other, I'll call it tools for due diligence. The Department of Defense is working along those same lines. I I think a cybersecurity community can help you with it, but in large part, understanding where your money is coming from and being judicious in where you accept funds from. I know survival is key for your company, but in some circumstances, your survival could be compromised by taking them from the wrong sources, because they will take advantage and have a history of taking advantage of small and medium-sized companies. And in fact, they've actually taken advantage of a couple of them. In addition to that, the idea of my associations, obviously I need to network. I need to know the right people, and I need to make sure that I'm getting in the right audiences, and I need to make sure that I'm given an opportunity to demonstrate my capability in the right venues. You also have to take a look at what affiliations and associations that you have. If it's associated with China, if it's associated with North Korea, if it's associated with Syria, if it's associated with Iran in particular, those countries have been identified as those that are major concern for at least the Defense Department when it comes to affiliations. So, and again, they're just like the finance are not always as candid as to their relationships. And so it becomes extremely important to know who's connected to who you want to be connected to. And again, what customers do you want to work with? And it's always good to reach out to those customers and let them know, I'm interested in doing some work with you. I'm being considered, or I want to participate in these particular committees or these particular associations. Is there anything that I need to be mindful of? And I think in those circumstances, caution is a great advisor when it comes to establishing affiliations and the networks that you want to be associated with. Sometimes it's driven by, the politics of today. You want to make sure that you align yourself appropriately. You just have to make sure a federal sector that who you're aligning yourself with is who they actually are, not who they advertise to be. And that if there's something to be known about them, you've done your due diligence to make sure that you know as best you can about who you're associated with.
And a lot of what you were talking about, I think, falls into that bucket that has become a really big, I don't want to say buzz term because it's much more serious than that, but it's FOCI. It's foreign ownership, control, and influence. And I know MoveAmerica recently presented a webinar and produced a study about FOCI. So that is certainly something that has a lot of people getting very nervous, not just within government circles, but within the commercial sector as well, because again, like you said, it's not who you think you're talking to, it's who you're actually talking to, because sometimes we think that perception becomes reality, but it's really not. They tend to mask things very well.
Exactly. And the FBI is very good to help with that. They have examples of where people have been taken advantage of and trying to help companies be aware and take certain precautions or asking certain questions. And so I think it's important that we try to use all of the arms of the government, that can help us with regard to information that will help protect the intellectual property of our companies, the economic competitiveness of our countries. And if we can do that, then we enhance our ability for our own national security. Because again, it's the companies, it's the innovators, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Northrops bring a lot to the table, but they also are major customers of the smaller components of the industrial base, the second and third tier suppliers, and their ability to work with companies that have been compromised is also a challenge. And so working with the people who you want to work with, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Northrops, the Raycons, among others, will also be a reasonable source. If you've been working with them in the past, I invite you to continue to do so and ask those questions. But what's on their list? I want to do some work with you. Is there something I need to be mindful of? And I think they'd be inclined to let you know that. And so I think we try to find as many sources of information as possible. What I can get from the federal government, what I get from my colleagues that also equally scrutinized for the efforts that we're going to work together with. And so if they can pass that level of scrutiny, I want to know what they're doing and see what I can do to put myself in the best position possible.
Well, Earl, thank you. This has been great. And we look forward to having you on another episode where we can continue this discussion about innovation in the defense sector.
More than glad to come. Thank you so much.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. The views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily represent the views or positions of MoveAmerica or its affiliates. Always consult with a qualified professional for advice specific to your circumstances. For more information about MoveAmerica and our mission to strengthen the defense industrial base through innovation and collaboration, visit us at www.moveamerica.org. Thank you for tuning in to Pathways to Partnership, powered by MoveAmerica. Until next time, stay inspired, Stay innovative, and we'll speak with you soon.